Hello, this is Dodie from Deliberate Aging. Welcome to my podcast. I have a question for you. How do you decide when to eat? Is it habit? Do you eat breakfast right after getting out of bed in the morning? Are meal times dictated by your work schedule? Do you only eat when you're hungry? Or maybe you use some combination of all three of these things. In the past, the only advice I ever heard about the timing of when to eat was that it was best to eat your largest meal of the day at lunchtime rather than dinner time. Other than that, there wasn't much advice out there. Sure, there's a ton of information out there on what to eat and how much to eat, but very little on when to eat. So I discovered a book by Jason Fung, MD, entitled The Complete Guide to Fasting, and that's where I learned a lot about intermittent fasting. So prior to reading this book, I had very limited knowledge on this subject, and the knowledge I did have was pretty scary. I thought that the definition of fasting meant going for extended times without anything other than water. And when I say extended times, I mean 1+ days with only water. So to me, that's scary. After reading the book, I learned a lot, and the idea of fasting is no longer scary to me. It can mean extended periods of time with no food, but it also can mean something totally different. It can mean hours without food rather than days. So the book describes a method where we consciously decide when to eat. So let me describe. There are 24 hours in a day, right? And we all are fasting whether we know it or not, because when we're sleeping, we're not eating. So say, for example, that you sleep from 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. So you sleep for 8 hours. That is 8 hours of fasting. Then you get up at 7 a.m., you have your breakfast. You're eating on and off throughout the day, and you have your last snack of the day right before bed at 11 p.m. That means that during those 24 hours, you fasted for 8 hours while you were asleep, and you ate for 16. Now, this doesn't mean that you ate constantly for 16 hours. It simply refers to the time period when you started eating for the day and when you stopped eating for the day. In this example, you would see the two numbers written like this, 8/16, whereas the first number represents the number of hours that you fast. The second number represents the number of hours that you eat. Proponents of fasting claim that it's healthier for us to extend the time that we fast and shorten the time that we eat. So instead of 8/16, they would advocate 16/8 is better. Just to restate, 16/8 means you're fasting 16 hours and eating 8. It doesn't mean that you're only consuming water during that fasting time. Other things are allowed. You can have water, unsweetened tea, unsweetened coffee, bone broth, and you also are allowed to add small amounts of cream or coconut oil to your tea or coffee, and it's still technically fasting, which makes me very happy because I cannot drink my morning coffee without cream. So before I get into the author's detailed fasting protocols, let me just tell you a couple points that he makes that I totally agree with. So first of all, he stresses healthy eating, incorporating real foods instead of highly processed junk foods. He advocates that we refrain from packaged foods, and you know what I'm talking about, the ones that come in boxes and a long ingredient list that require a chemistry degree to decipher. These are usually the foods found in the center aisles of the grocery store. He wants us to focus on real food that is recognizable in its original form, such as an apple or a piece of broccoli. These tend to be found on the perimeters of the grocery store. He also talks about the 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Many diets in the past advised using these 3 as a guide to healthy eating, and they set specific percentages of each macronutrient that we should be consuming. For example, the older dietary guidelines for Americans advised that we should keep dietary fat at less than 30% of total calories. Now, the author says this is misguided because it assumes that all fats are equal, that all carbs are equal, and that all proteins are equal. He debunks this myth that all are equal. For example, extra virgin olive oil is clearly not the same as margarine, even though both are technically fats. Kale is not the same as sugar, even though both are carbs. Now, I would add to this that not all calories are created equal. There are diets out there that impose a caloric limit to be adhered to every day if you want to lose weight. Say, for example, that your limit is 2,000 calories per day. Well, if you create a pile of 2,000 calories worth of leafy greens like spinach, kale, and arugula, and then you create a second pile of 2,000 calories of chocolate, the size of the two piles will be dramatically different. The volume of the greens pile will be huge compared to the chocolate pile. But that's not the only difference. The pile of greens also contains beneficial things such as vitamins, minerals, and fiber, which the chocolate pile does not have. So that's why I'm a firm believer that not all calories are created equal, and I'm sure the author of this book would agree with me. Now, he believes that most diets are complex, and that's why many of them fail. They're complex because of all the rules that need to be followed. Fasting, on the other hand, is very easy because there's only one rule. Don't eat during a specific time. There are no restrictions on calories or type of food consumed. However, the author does advocate for choosing the healthiest food options. The author also brings up a point about the occasional splurge, which I totally agree with. Most diets fail because they're very strict, and he acknowledges that we're human and we need to feast on special occasions. So most diets fail because they do not allow for the special occasions. Fasting, on the other hand, does recognize that there are going to be times when people are feasting, and they should do it and enjoy it, and then right after that, they should get back onto their fasting protocol. Now, there are chapters in this book related to specific conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and aging, where he goes into great detail. And the author is a medical doctor, so he gets very detailed and scientific in his explanations of the conditions themselves and how they can benefit from fasting. He describes how each condition can be improved, but he repeatedly stresses that people should consult with their own doctors before fasting, especially if they are on any medications. I picked this book up, and I personally have tried intermittent fasting, and I'll admit I found it really hard at first. I was used to eating breakfast right when I first got up in the morning, and not doing that was a little strange for me at first. But as I kept practicing it, it got easier, and now I do it almost every single day. I was really interested in this book because I was at a point in my life where I was struggling to lose weight. I thought I was doing everything right. I was eating healthy, I was exercising almost every day, but the last 10 pounds wouldn't budge. Even if I could manage to drop a few pounds, it always came back. That drop was just temporary. With intermittent fasting, I was successfully able to lose the 10 pounds, and I kept it off. So now on most days, I fast for 16 hours and eat for only 8. I don't eat breakfast when I wake up, but I do have my coffee with cream, which is allowed. I have breakfast at about 10 a.m. and finish eating by 6 p.m. at night. Now, I'll be honest, when I first started this, I was worried that I'd be hungry at night. So I ate a huge meal at 5:30. But as time passed and I got used to this, I realized that I wasn't getting hungry at all. And so now I'm just having normal sized meals. As I stated, I was successfully able to lose those last 10 pounds, and I've kept it off for over 2 years. I stick to a 16-8 schedule most days of the week, and I allow myself some freedom on the weekends. If I feel like my weight is moving up, I simply cut back my eating window to be a bit more strict for a few days, maybe to a 18/6, whereas I'm fasting for 18 hours and eating for only 6. And then once I feel like I'm back where I need to be, I go to my normal routine once again. In my personal situation, intermittent fasting has been really successful in terms of weight loss. as I mentioned, I dropped those 10 pounds and I've been able to keep it off. But I also noticed that my brain is less foggy when I'm fasting. A colleague of mine had once told me that he intentionally fasts whenever he has a big project due at work because he feels like it improves his ability to think. And of course it saves time. You don't need to spend time cooking, eating. Instead, you just focus on that big project at work. The only improvement that I did not see was a change in my cholesterol level. And the author does say that if you want a specific result and you're not getting it, then you might need to try a different fasting protocol, say a shorter eating window. Now, for my purposes, I was really only looking to lose weight and not necessarily to reduce my cholesterol, so I didn't cut back any further on my eating time. So, as I said, it was very successful for me. I'm wondering if any of you out there, listeners, have tried this. If you have, please let me know your feedback. I'd like to know if you had results similar to mine. Maybe you had better, worse results. I want to hear it all. So please jump over to my Facebook page and let me know about your fasting experience. Thanks for listening. This is Dodie from Deliberate Aging. Until next time, be well, friends. This podcast is presented solely for informational and educational purposes only. Use of information from this podcast is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician or other qualified professional. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of this podcast.